Welcome to my Irish History channel here on YouTube. My name is Sean Murphy. Today I'm going to give you a preview of an upcoming course on the Viking invasions of Ireland. The course will be in January of 2024, a couple of weeks' time. And today I will be giving you a short PowerPoint presentation that looks at some of the issues that I will be dealing with in a lot more detail in the course itself. The title of my course is The Viking Invasions of Ireland, and it covers the period from 795 to 1014, that's AD or Common Era. Just to give you an idea of what was thought of the Vikings in Ireland, there were annals kept in just about every monastery in Ireland. Some of them survive, and this was a quote that I found interesting. They refer to them as the sea vomitings from the north. So I'm an Irish historian. I live on Cape Cod, and in the past 10 years, I've developed two programs. One is a chronological general history of Ireland, and the second is a history of Ireland's 32 counties. Each course is presented live on Zoom once a week for 4 weeks. Recordings are available, and anyone who cannot make it they're on a Thursday. If you can't make it on a Thursday, you can take the course through the recordings, or if you do register for Thursday and you miss a class, the recordings are available. I have 2 points of contact. One is my web site, irishhistory.online, and that's my email address. So how do I go about making my presentations? Well, I employ archaeological data, geological records, linguistic analysis, historical analysis, and I include local folklore to construct my courses. The historical materials include ancient documents, manuscripts, annals that were kept primarily in the monasteries, and then scholarly research over the past 1,000 years. Now, my aim is to make the presentations accessible by using simple English, free of jargon, and by presenting a summary of the content on each slide. I don't just put bullet points. I try to make it accessible that way. I also reference the content of each slide and include additional reference materials for those wishing to delve further into the topics covered. So in January, I will present 2 courses, the history of County Longford and the Viking invasions of Ireland. This video is going to focus on the Viking invasions. So I'll briefly introduce the main topics from the course, and I do so in chronological order. These are some of the questions that will be answered in the course. Who were the Vikings? Where did the Vikings come from? Why did they come to Ireland? What was their impact? The decline of the Vikings in Ireland, and what was their enduring contribution. Now, the invention of the longboat, and that's an image of the longboat there, made it possible for Viking warriors to sail across the North Sea to attack Britain, France, and Ireland. The first wave of Viking attacks in Ireland was from 795 to 851. This map shows you 2 things. In the red dots there reply to the Viking encampments, and the black squares are where the principal monasteries were attacked. Now, the Vikings founded Dublin, as well as a number of other cities that we have Waterford and Limerick, and some towns as well, like Wexford. Now, the Vikings founded Dublin. It was their base of operations in Ireland. They used the rivers Shannon, Erne, and Bann to access the interior. They raided Irish settlements, then marched or shipped their captives or slaves to Dublin. They held them there for a few days, waiting for relatives to ransom them. Those that weren't ransomed were sold. From there, they went to the slave markets in Al-Andalus, North Africa, and the Middle East. Dublin, in fact, became the largest slave market in Western Europe. So a little bit about Vikings. The etymology derives from Viking from the feminine Vik, meaning creek, inlet, or small bay. So Vikings then are known as men of the bays. There are other names that you would find in the literature because the term Viking wasn't something that was used at the time. It was a name that was, if you like, brought up to cover the name for the people later on. But at the time, they were known as Norsemen, which was men of the north, Lachlands, men from the lakes, Ostmen or Ostmen, men from the east. Then they were called landleapers because they came primarily for land when they had, if you like, completed their early raids for mobile wealth. The main attraction of Ireland was the quality and the quality of the land. Sometimes they were just simply called Danes, no matter where they came from. And the most common name that was used for them was foreigners. So where did they come from? Well, most of those who initially attacked the shores of Ireland came from the valleys and fjords of western Norway, and then later they came from Denmark. A little bit about the expansion of Scandinavia. Now, generally speaking, the Norwegians expanded to the north and west to places such as Ireland, Scotland, Iceland, and Greenland. The Danes expanded to England and France, settling in the Danelaw, which was a part of England, the northern and eastern England, and then Normandy. The Swedes expanded to the east, founding the Kievan Rus, which was the original Russia. Now, the Viking era, or age, as it's often referred to, is a period from around 800 to around 1050 AD. And during that period, literally, the Vikings terrorized Europe. Eventually, they were converted to Christianity, and the opportunities for raiding, such as their slave trade, were reduced. And that was for a number of reasons. One was the conversion to Christianity. Also, they were now able to trade in merchandise, replaced trade in people. They had built up towns, so they had expanded their abilities to, if you like, gain wealth. So during the time period of the Viking Age, though, it is often said that the Vikings were the first white people to reach the New World, in other words, the American continent. So who were they? Well, at home, they were simply farmers and seamen. They were skilled in many crafts. Their maritime technology was very advanced for the time, and they had a keen eye for business and trade. They were the greatest slave traders of their age. Now, when you ask the question, why did they expand? There are a number of reasons. And one of them is because they were pagans and Christianity had not at this stage reached Scandinavia. So one common theory posits that Charlemagne literally translates as Charles the Great, used force and terror to Christianize all pagans, leading to baptism, conversion, or execution. And as a result, from that threat, Vikings and other pagans resisted and wanted revenge. Professor Rudolf Simic, he puts it this way: it is not a coincidence if the early Viking activity occurred during the reign of Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne was the king of the Franks, who were the peoples who settled in modern-day France, and France gets its name from them. And in 800 AD, he was crowned emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. At this stage, the Pope needed an army, and he did a deal with Charlemagne and made him the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Why did they come to Ireland? Well, some of the reasons that are given or quoted would be the inadequate economic opportunities at home, and this was due mainly to overpopulation, and also to the productivity and fertility of the land there. So as the population grew, it was very difficult in their territory to get access to good quality land. Also, they had a desire to seek warmer and more fertile and fruitful lands to colonize. This was all aided, of course, by other events that were going on in the world, such as the disappearance of the Pictish fleets from the northern waters, the destruction of the power of the Frisians in 734, and the final subjugation by Charlemagne. It literally then opened up the seas for the Vikings, and they took full advantage of that. Now, the first recorded raids in Ireland were on Lambay Island off Dublin and Rathlin Island off of Antrim, and they occurred in the year 795 AD. The raids brought the age of saints and scholars, which was a 300 to 400 year period in Ireland, which saw Ireland achieve some major advances in education, and also the production of manuscripts and various other goods was unsurpassed at the time. So that all came to an end because they destroyed the inland sanctuaries and the monastic coastal settlements and headlands. And all of the major events and developments during the period of the saints and scholars occurred around the monastic settlements. So once they were destroyed, that was it. So there's a couple of phases, and I'll be dealing with those in a lot of detail because I tried to break it down for you to get a sense of the achievement, if you like, of the Vikings. So the first 20 to 25 years is seen as the early period, where they raided and looted, making off with portable wealth and slaves. Generally, they didn't camp and stay overnight. What they would do typically was they would find an island that was deserted, or they would take a small island that was had few people on it and clear the people from it, either kill them or take them and sell them as slaves. Then they would use that island as a place to store their loot. And then at the end of the raiding and looting season, then they would return back home with all of this loot. They often took children and women as slaves after killing off the men. The reason they did that was they discovered that it was dangerous to take the men, because the men, first of all, might attack them and might threaten the boat on water, and also if they left them behind, there was a good chance that the men were going to follow them. So they decided in the end the simple solution to that was just take the women and children and don't take the men. Now, the monasteries were raided because they were wealthy in themselves, but also because of their strong walls and towers. They acted like banks holding the wealth of the community. So people within the community who had valuables would often store them at the monasteries. The Annals of Ulster, again, which are contemporaneous records that were kept, and an entry from the year 820. This is what it says: the sea spewed forth floods of foreigners over Erin, so that no haven, no landing place, no stronghold, no fort, no castle might be found, but it was submerged by waves of Vikings and pirates. So the first invasion, if you like, of Ireland then followed that period, and it began in 832. Now they moved inland. They had at this stage learned the language. They had also allied with numerous, clans, and assisted them in their internal warfare in Ireland. They had also figured out how to get up the rivers and return from the rivers safely. So they moved inland, and at one point they gained almost total control. The situation in Ireland was really unprepared. The leaders there were perpetually at war, completely underestimated what was going on, didn't fully understand. And partly because the tradition in Ireland was to be welcoming. So it wasn't as if Vikings were coming as marauders every day. You had invasions and you had times when there was a lot of violence, but there were other times when there was simple people arriving on the coast and they were accommodated. Um, Partly because they were coming with wealth, partly because there was some land available, because there had been a couple of hundred years previous to that, when Ireland and Europe had gone through, if you like, continuous plague that had decimated the population. So there was some room for people to come. So Ireland had no national army, no national leader, no organized navy. The main kings in Ireland were at war with themselves. And in fact, monastic communities themselves were often at war. And also, some Irish kings and even abbots and bishops saw potential for recruiting these Vikings as mercenary soldiers to help them in their internal wars in Ireland. So the immediate response was not to see them as the kind of threat that needed to be dealt with in some kind of unified way. Then, around 50 years later, from the arrival of the first Vikings, the Danes arrived. Now, tensions between the Danes and the Vikings led to civil war, essentially, between them in the 890s, and the Irish took advantage of that and drove the Vikings from Ireland in 902. Now, the Vikings returned about 15 years later, and by 920, they had retaken the towns of Ireland and inflicted a massive defeat on the Irish, destroying considerable number of the leaders of the clans in Ireland. And it took the clans in Ireland 40 or 50 years to recover from that. So it ended then with a Gaelic revival in the second half. The Irish began to turn the tide against. So at this stage, you had we're talking, multiple generations at this time. So you had what was known as the Hiberno Norse, which were people who were second, third generation. You had some incoming people, but a lot of them were considering themselves, a combination of Scandinavian and Irish. But they were separate in the sense that they occupied the urban centers. And also, even though they didn't try to introduce their culture or other aspects of their society, they still posed a military threat. But a series of military defeats then from the 960s effectively destroyed their military capacity. In the end, there was a major battle in 1014 at the Battle of Clontarf, and that essentially ended the military threat of the Vikings in Ireland. And also, it destroyed their military capability abroad, because in an attempt to win the battle in Clontarf, they had brought in much of their armies from the islands of Britain and further afield. And a lot of their leaders were killed in that battle. So that set them back substantially, not just in Ireland, but further afield. The victorious Irish didn't see any reason to expel them all, as had happened in 902. What the Irish chiefs now saw was the opportunity to essentially make money. These towns were vibrant, and the Vikings understood the nature of trade. They also needed protection. So a lot of the Irish clans got money, if you like, from selling protection. They also traded with them for goods that were being produced on their lands. So in that situation, the Irish chieftains saw no reason to do anything other than work with them, get them to submit to the control of Irish people, but to allow them to continue their way of life. And that's what they did. And over time, then they became fully integrated into the Irish population. So here's my history courses. As I said earlier, to register, send an email to me, or just register at irishhistory.online. So Thursday is January the 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th. The early class is the history of County Longford. The later one is the one I've just gone through here, the Viking invasions. They're all presented live on Zoom. They're also available by recordings for those who cannot attend. And each 4-week course registration fee is 100. So I hope that gives you some sense of what will be available in that course. There will be a lot of additional resources will be cited at the end of it. So anyone who cares to do some further research can do it in 4 weeks or literally 4 hours. It's difficult to go into the full level of detail. But the other side of that is that most of the people who sign on to my courses are not people who are students of history. They have an interest in learning more about their Irish heritage, and the kind of summary that I give satisfies that. For those who would like to learn more, that's where I provide the additional materials. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope that some of you will get back to me and join some of my courses. Thank you.